everyone. My name is Tess Greinock, and I'm a research data and scholarly communications librarian here at the R and RStudio Library. And today, I'm excited to share with you how to communicate your findings effectively and reproducibly using charts produced with R and ggplot2. In fact, everything that we're going to be covering today is available on this webpage, which I will be sharing as a link in the video description. So to follow along with today's class, you will need to download R and RStudio. If you have not done so already, pause this video and go to posit.co/download/RStudio-desktop, and you'll be prompted to download, install R, and install RStudio. When you go to install R, you're going to want to choose the correct operating system for your computer. And then once you have clicked on the correct operating system, for example, mine would be Windows, you're going to want to click on the install R for the first time, and then go to download, and it will begin that download for you. So for today, for those who are new to these two tools, R is a programming language and the software that interprets the scripts written in the language. And RStudio is what's called an integrated development environment, or IDE, which provides tools to make programming easier, which we will experience today. And I'm going to be doing a live coding demonstration, and you'll get the most out of this workshop if you follow along on your own device. But if you prefer to just watch and try it yourself later, that is fine as well. But why would you want to use R to create visualizations in the first place? Well, it ensures that your visualizations are reproducible, there's less pointing and clicking, and you're able to create visualizations without altering the data we input into our script. The visualization possibilities are also limitless with R and cross-disciplinary boundaries. And R works with all types and sizes of data, and it's a great free open source tool and has a large and welcoming community. So now that I've hopefully convinced you to the awesomeness of R, go ahead and open up RStudio if you haven't already. RStudio is broken up into different windows that will help you as you're creating your R scripts and visualizations. The main windows we'll be using today are the console, where you should see the current version of R loaded on your computer. So in this case, for me, it's 4.2.1. And this is where the code will run. This files pane is where your current directory and files are located within it. And then your plots tab is where you're going to preview the plots that we create. And then help to pull up help documentation. And then our environment at the top here is to keep track of the data and variables that are loaded in the R environment. So whenever you're starting a new R analysis or visualization with R, it's good to create an R project to keep all the input and output files organized. So to create a new R project, you would want to go to File menu and then New Project. Alternatively, if you click on this blue button, that's like a blue cube with an R in it and the plus sign above it, it will also create a new project. And you'll have the option of using an existing directory, which is an existing folder, or to create a brand new directory. So let's go ahead and create a new directory since I don't have a folder set up for this already. And we are going to want the new R project. And I'm going to browse and find where I want to put this. So I'm just going to put it on my desktop for now. And so what I'm going to call this directory is something you could use something along the lines of learning R data viz. And I'm going to give it a date as well. And create project. And there we go. It has created that new project for me and it created a new folder, and all that's in it is just the project itself. So in my folder structure itself, and I can bring this over to the view screen here. on my desktop, all that I have in this folder is just this project. So whenever I want to reopen the project where I left off, if you double click the project itself, it'll reopen everything and set up your working directory and everything for you. So now that our project is up, we are ready to create our a couple of folders which will help you with your organization. So one of the first folders that you might want to set up is a new folder for your data. So I'm going to create a data folder as well as a charts folder, since we know that we're going to be creating some charts. And so this will give a location for us to put our data and our charts as well. So we can go ahead and add the data for today's workshop into that data folder. It was emailed to participants of the class, but if you don't have it, you can also download it, and I'll provide that link. It's available in the class instructions that is linked in the description below. So now that so I'm just going to do that quickly. All right. To download the CSV, what you're going to need to do is click on the raw button here, and then it's going to show the raw data and then save as, and I'm just going to put it into that folder that we had created on our desktop. So in our data folder, and press save. Excellent. All right. So now we have our data. We have our charts folder set up. So going back to our RStudio here, we can go ahead and create our R script file where we will write our code and it will be saved. So to create a new script file, you can do that from the menu, file menu. So file, new file, R script. You can also click this little page icon here with the plus sign. It's also going to give you that drop-down menu of options to create. So now that we've created our R file, at the top of all your R files, it's important to add a description. So the syntax for adding a description, notes, and comments to R code is the # or a number sign or hashtag. So I'm going to start by giving my project a title. So I'm going to just call it Introduction to Data Visualization with R and ggplot2. And then if you would like, you can add who the instructor is, just so you know who to contact. And then you could add your name to your notes to identify who is taking the notes here. So you'll notice that after we started making these changes to the file, that the file name in the tab turned red and we had like a little asterisk that appeared right next to it. And it's a reminder that we have not saved the document yet. So what you're going to want to do is hit that floppy disk icon to save it. So go ahead and give it a name. So in this case, I'm going to give it a descriptive file name of data viz R class 2023-02. And then I'm going to save. And as we're going along and adding more lines of code, you want to keep remembering to save. So some shortcuts for this are to use Control S on PC or Command S on Mac. So I'll try and remind you as we're going along as well. So to expand what's available in the base R, we need to install some packages. So to install packages, if you've never used tidyverse before, you're going to need to install the whole package. So for this, you're going to need to use install.packages and then tidyverse. first. And then you can go ahead and run that by clicking on the Run button here. If you already have it installed, then you do not need to include that. You can just go straight to indicating what library you're going to be using. So in this case, we are going to be using the tidyverse library as well. And go ahead and click Control Enter, and that will run that line of code. So you have an alternative, a shortcut to clicking the Run button. It's Control Enter for PCs or Command Enter for Macs. So usually when you're creating a visualization, you'd identify your question or goal, identify the audience for your results, collect and analyze the data needed, and choose appropriate visualizations to meet the needs of your question, audience, and data. And I find it helpful to sketch it out, especially when I'm using a new tool, as well as apply good design concepts and edit as necessary. So for today, the first 3 steps have been completed already, and we're ready to move on to step 4. So we've already identified a question and a goal, and identified the audience, and I collected the analyzed the data needed, but now we need to choose the appropriate visualization to meet the needs of our question, audience, and data. So the data that we're going to be using today comes from the 2019 Nature PhD Student Survey, and I've linked to the GitHub repository with the script that I use to clean the data if you're interested. So that is on the webpage for the class. And to use data in R and RStudio, it has to be read into the environment first and given a variable name. So if we go back to the RStudio, so I'm going to make a note that we're going to import the data, and then we're going to give it a variable name of PhD survey, and then backwards arrow read.csv. And then since I've already put it in my data folder, I can use a relative path name. And to help us, one of the helpful features of RStudio is that if you start writing a path name and you want to use one of the files that's within a folder, or search for a folder that's a child of a parent folder, if you click on tab after you put the dash, it'll automatically fill in if there's only one folder or file within that folder, or it'll give you the options of which one to choose. So it's automatically added that full text in. That's a nice little shortcut there. And and I just wanted to point out that I've used a relative path to the file as opposed to writing out the full file name, which shorts the name that I need to type. And it means that if I package my data and script together in its current folder structure and give it to someone else, they should be able to run it. And you can import many different file types into R using different libraries. And I've listed a few of them on the class webpage. But for today, all we need to use was read CSV. So we're all good to go. And you've noticed that we need to save again. So if you want to click on Control S or Command S if you're on Mac. So now that we have our data and we're ready to create our chart, but what type of chart should we create? So there are many different chart types to choose from, and experts have developed some chart choosing tools, which I've linked on the class webpage. However, it's important to keep in mind that some visual channels are more effective than others. And usually the simple charts are most effective. So if you take a look at the data, and one way that we can do this is that once we run the line, so you can Control Enter or Command Enter on Mac. We'll see the data here, and we can click on that little sort of spreadsheet icon to the right of our variable name, and it'll bring up a table of our data. And so if we take a look at this data here, what type of chart should we choose if we were interested in the research question, which country has the most respondents who are studying in the same country they grew up in? So when I think of this question, some things that immediately come to mind are that the variables that we are working with are categorical. For the country, and then numerical for the number of respondents. So that sort of helps to narrow down the types of charts. So the type of chart that I think would best fit this and that I want to try first is a bar chart. So, and so that's what we're going to aim for. And there are many resources for creating charts in ggplot2. However, my favorite one that I'll be referring to most often in today's class is the data visualization with ggplot2 cheat sheet. And so I sometimes use this to help think of maybe a different chart that I might want to use. But if I look on the list here, I can see so a column chart already here that I might want to use. And so that will help me gives an understanding of the different properties that are available for that chart. So with any ggplot chart, you start with what data you'll be using. And since I'm only interested in the students who are studying in the countries they grew up in, I'll need to apply a filter. So first I'm going to apply that filter. So home PhD is what I'm going to call this variable. And the filter I'm going to use the function filter on my PhD survey data to only respondents that were studying in their home countries. But yes, and I'm going to make a note of what I was doing here. So filter for respondents studying in their home country. And then we're going to go ahead and create the plot. So I'm going to run this, our filter, and then create our plot. So ggplot2, and our data is going to be our home PhD. So you notice once we run the line for our ggplot, when we just have the data, that it's going to pop up in our plots area, but all it's going to have is just this gray screen. It's because we haven't defined the plot area at all. We don't have any X or Y axes, and it doesn't know like what type of chart that we want to add. So next, we're going to define our plot area through mapping using the aesthetic function, and this generates a blank plot. So I'm going to go ahead and add mapping equals AES for aesthetic, and then X equals, and we're going to be using country for our X-axis, and total for our Y. And then if I run that using Control Enter or Command Enter, I'm just going to get a blank plot with nothing on it because we haven't told it yet what type of chart and what exactly we want added on it. So the language of ggplot uses to add another line is a plus sign. So by adding a plus sign, it's we can build onto layers onto our ggplot. So to add our next element, which is going to be our geom, we are going to do a geom column since I already decided that's what I wanted to use. And if I just leave it blank, it has automatically gives me that data. Now, so we have a basic bar chart, but there are a number of chart improvements that we can make to better communicate our story. And since R has such an infinite variety of features for charts, there's usually more than one way to accomplish a task. And I find it useful to create a plot wish list for all the improvements I want to accomplish with the chart. This is also useful if you're new to R and need to look up how to make the changes. So to do that, I'm just going to add some extra lines to my code here. And I'm just going to title this section plot wish list. My favorite part about the plot wish list is when I get to cross things off the list. So one of the things that I'm going to want to do is to reorder the chart because it's not in any order right now. And then I also might want to change the style of it. I'm not so keen on the number of grid lines that there are, so maybe we could change that. And one way that you could do that is by changing the theme of the chart. And this is going to change the background and axes and a whole number of different aesthetic features. And it's a great place to start before you do some finer tuning because it does a lot all at once. So I might also maybe want to change the color of the bars to make them stand out more and make it more in line with the message I'm trying to tell. I could also go ahead and highlight the United States if that was something that I was interested in. And of course, I'm going to want to add a title. And I'm going to change the axes titles because they're not very descriptive right now. And I might also want to adjust the y-axis so it starts at 0, so it's sort of not floating in space there. All right, so I'm going to save our plot wish list there. And we're going to start at the top of the list, which is to reorder this chart. So you can go back up to where we started to create our plot here. And it's always better to put your chart in some sort of order. And by default, ggplot2 will order bars based on factors in the x-axis. So in this case, for country, that's going to be alphabetically. So to get our chart to order the bars based on the number of respondents, we need to tell it how to sort the data. So to be able to do this, we are going to want to, first of all, go back to our filter that we have here. And then we want to mutate it so that we can reorder it the way that we want. So to add another function, I'm going to use the pipe and it's a percentage sign greater than percentage sign, or I've used Control-Shift-M on PC or Command-Shift-M on Mac. That was also a shortcut for that. So I'm going to mutate, and then so country, and we're going to factor reorder for the country to be sorted by the total. And then if we go, Control Enter, and then that has has reordered our home PhD. And if we go back to look at that, we will see that it is no longer is a factor with 93 levels. So now we are going to, if we rerun our chart here, it is now ordered. So yay, that worked. So now we can cross that off our list. Yay. The next thing that we want to look at is the theme of the chart. So as I mentioned before, it changes the overall look of your chart, and there's a number of preset combinations of backgrounds, axes, formats, grid lines, and a short list of these different themes can be found on that handy dandy checklist that we referred to earlier. If you look on the second page, there's a short list of some of the themes here. And if you load other packages and libraries, there are some additional themes that you can add as well. So the world is your oyster in terms of the variety of themes that are available. So the one that I like particularly is the light theme. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. And you can add that again using that plus sign. So theme underscore light. And you can see here, even though as I typed theme, you can see all the different ones that get brought up. So I'm just going to use theme light, and then using our open brackets, and then run that to show how that has changed. Now that we've changed it, I want to focus, and it's looking pretty good. I'm going to change the color of our bar charts. So to change the color of our bars, we're going to fill the aesthetic within GM column. And there's also a color aesthetic, and it dictates the outline of the bars. So that there's a difference between fill and color. And so the fill aesthetic, and we're going to add that in here, can accept a number of different entries. So for example, you could put in a particular color if you wanted to, such as red. Keep in mind that a lot of these colors that are defaults are very bright. So generally, I don't recommend using them. But if there's a specific color that you do want to use, I recommend using the hexadecimal color code, or hex code, as it's often referred to. And these are 6-digit codes composed of numbers from 0 to 9 and letters from A to F that create all the human visible colors. And my preferred site for finding these is colorhex.com. So if you go to colorhex.com, that way you can search number of colors by using this color chooser, or search a color name, or they have a number of user favorites on the bottom. Now, the one that I want to use today is a version of gray. So it's just a bunch of 9s, because I just want to make it a blank slate for me to then highlight the United States later. So I've created sort of my blank slate. But if you are wanting some other ideas for colors, some other places that you can find them and pull inspiration is like using an image color picker, for example, or using different color gradients if you're using multiple colors from sites such as Reordering, which is built into ggplot2, or Cartocolor as well. And you can use groups of colors and inspirations from palettes, using such tools as Chroma.js or Color Palette Helper or Color Picker for your data. These are all great resources. But some points to keep in mind when choosing colors is that you want to limit colors when possible. So that's part of the reason why I went with a gray. And label directly. Ensure a strong contrast with the background. So my gray is dark enough that it's has enough contrast with my white background. I might even want to make it darker or make the lines that are behind it a little bit lighter so that there is even that stronger contrast between them. You also want to use colors strategically to highlight a group, which we are going to do next. And keep in mind that colors have meanings that change across cultures. So maybe, so I'm choosing blue for the United States because that's part of the national colors, but perhaps there are certain associations with blue that you would not want to portray. And you want to use, you could also use predefined color meanings to your best advantage, especially for things such as using blue for water, for example. And if you are using a color scale, there's a couple things that you should keep in mind. The sequential color scales should only be used on quantitative data or ordered qualitative data, whereas diverging color scales should only be used where there's a meaningful middle point. All right, so we've talked a lot about color. However, let's take a look at how we can use color to highlight one of the bars. Particularly, we're going to look at the country United States. So I have all my bars as gray currently, and I've checked that off our plot wish list. And if I wanted to see what other possibilities are available for geom color in terms of aesthetics, I can use the question mark to help pull up the help menu. And then it'll show me the range of the aesthetics that are available that you can use. So the next thing that we're going to be using is we're going to be using fill again, but this time we're going to add a second geom on top of our current one to highlight the United States. So we're going to add another geom column, and this time we're going to specify that the data being used in this is filtered from our previous one. So we're going to use that same home PhD data, and you'll see that RStudio very helpfully automatically picked up on which data set that I was wanting to use. And so you can just select that by pressing enter. And then I'm going to indicate the country that I want it to filter by, which is the United States. And then, as I mentioned, I want to use a blue for this. And so I'm going to indicate the fill for this to be 1B6BB4. This is a color that I had picked out earlier. And then if we run that, now I have United States as highlighted on the chart. And it's great to be able to identify that it is the country with the most students that are studying in their home country. So now that we have the colors how we want, let's focus on the text. So some things keep in mind for best practices for text and charts is that we want to keep the text horizontal as much as possible, and to annotate figures directly to highlight key points in a chart, and use descriptive titles. So first off, I'm going to want to add a title and some axes to our chart. And we can do that using a function called labs. And so I'm going to add that to the end here. And I'm going to make sure that our x-axis has a capitalized country, and y is a bit more descriptive. I'm going to call number of respondents. And then instead of a title, we're going to use a caption. So for a caption, it'll appear below the chart, and I'm going to call this figure 1. Number of respondents who remained in the country, and I'm gonna press enter just to maintain, try and stay within a narrow coding column for easier reading. they grew up in for their graduate studies. Perfect. And now if we add that, now we see it. And looks like it saw those enters. So I'm going to take those out so that it all appears down below. All right. So I mentioned that it's great to have all of the text horizontal, but sometimes your horizontal text can overlap, such as our countries on the x-axis. And so it'll make it easier to read if we flip the x and y axis. So to accomplish this, we're going to use the chord flip function. So I'm going to add a plus sign to the end of our ggplot, and then we're going to add our chord flip or flip coordinates, open brackets, and enter. So now they're all together. And we can see if we make this chart larger by bringing up the names, will start to spread out a little bit more. And our chart is sort of floating away from the names, so I want to adjust the axis so it starts at 0. And I want to do this before the chord flip. So this is the nice part about using the different functions and variables within within ggplot2 is that you can add these variables are stacked on one on top of another. So you can go back and add them where you need to. So I'm going to go ahead and add my scale for our y-axis. So we're going to do a continuous scale, expand, and we want it to start at 0. And then we are going to put some limits on it, and we're going to do it from all the way to 50. Then remember to put a plus sign at the end of that, so we still get the coordinate flip. And now it is brought together. However, it's now cutting off our last label, the 1250. So we're going to need to adjust the margin of the theme. So if we go back to our theme light, or rather, if you add theme below, we can add our plot margin and indicate how much of a margin we want around our chart. So in this case, we're just going to add an extra 10. We have 10 all around and then 20 on the right-hand side. So that takes care of the last of our remaining plot wish list items. And I also wanted to point out that you can also use the theme to style the text using element text. So, and you can find out what you can change within element text by using that question mark again to find out a little bit more. So if you go down, you can see here, you can change things like font family, the color, the size, if you need to make horizontal or vertical adjustments, angle, etc. So once we're now all finished our chart and we are ready to export it. So to export our final chart and share it with the world, we're going to first need to assign our chart a name, then use ggSave to export. And with ggSave, we can also specify width, height, and units. So let's go ahead and give this a name. So in this case, we're going to call it home PhD plot. Use our backwards arrow again. And we'll see, I'm going to just scroll down our environment to show that it does show up here as well. And it shows up as a list. And now that we have it in, has a name, now we can use ggSave. So ggSave, and the first thing you're going to need to do is to indicate where you want to put it. So we've already created our charts folder. So I'm going to indicate that that's where I want it to go. And then give it a name. So I'm going to call this home PhD plot. And I want it to output as a PNG file and indicate what data, which plot we want to use, which is the home PhD plot. And then give it a width. So I'm going to give it, I'm going to do a 6x12. And usually it might take a couple of times for me to get the correct size that I want, unless there's a specification from your journal that have a certain size requirement. I usually play around with the size a little bit to make sure that the chart's in the right proportions. And then if I go ahead and save it, now we have our final chart. So I'm going to, and you can see that in our charts file here. And I'll bring it up back to the main screen to show you that we have our final plot. So when you share a chart, don't forget to cite the data, regardless if the data is your own or someone else's. This helps the reader find the original data source and increases the legitimacy of your chart. So for example, if I was just sharing the chart or on a slide of some sort, I could cite the data as part of my figure caption or as a little citation on the side. And some of the things that you might want to include in that data citation are author, creator, title, year of publication, publisher, and version or edition, and access information if it's available in a repository of some sort. Before I finish off this video, I want to ask, do you think we created this visualization responsibly, or what could make this visualization better? So we didn't distort the data, which is great. We answered a research question, awesome. But is there additional context that could be added for our audience to better understand the data? And the answer is yes. And we might want to think about what type of contextual data could we add, and something that we could add is the number of respondents from each country. Because maybe the answer to why we have a large number of respondents from the United States that are studying in their home country is that there's just a large number of people that answer that are from that are studying in the United States. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So within our plot here, I'm going to add another geom. And as I mentioned, you add layers on layers. So I want to add this actually as my first geom so that it appears underneath the other data that we looked at. So I'm going to add another geom column. And this time we're going to look at the original data set, not the one that we filtered. And so I'm going to pull up that full PhD survey. And I'm just going to use another light gray color. And this case, I'm going to use C1. And don't forget your hashtag and the plus sign at the end of our row, the line there. And that way, I'm going to call this our second plot here. And we can see from our chart, which I will bring back over to our main area here, that some areas have, it looks like the United States had a lot of respondents, or at least the respondents are being, all of them are being covered by our blue bar here. And actually, it's being cut off because we have so many respondents from the United States that that bar is being cut off. So I need to go ahead and adjust my limits again. So I'm just going to put, this is me guessing at the number of how large it should be. And we're not being cut off, so presumably, hopefully that has done the trick. And yes, so we can see that there is a large number of respondents that are responding from the United States, and that and the reason that it has reordered this is, and you'll notice that they're all ordered alphabetically. If you can, you might have already guessed this, is because it's ordering based on that PhD survey. So we would then need to go back and change that ordering. But you can see here how you might want to add context, and I can see here maybe want to adjust my limits to something around maybe 2,000, probably what I would need. But with that, I'm going to close off, and there's a few resources that you'll probably find very useful that I have provided on the class webpage. If you scroll to the bottom, there's some further resources to learn more R and more data visualization tips and tricks, along with our resource guide all about data visualization. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. And I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great rest of your day.